Hello and welcome to The Signal, a podcast about media, journalism and technology. I'm Tom Trewinnard.
And I'm Fergus Bell. And every week we'll be here to talk about the new developments that really matter to audiences and the innovation that drives them.
The Signal. You are listening to The Signal.
The Signal.
Cutting through the noise.
You are listening to The Signal.
But let's begin with who we are and why we're making this show. Tom, who are you?
So I'm a journalist and one of the co-founders of Fathm, which is an independent news lab and consultancy, and we work with newsrooms all around the world. My background was as a journalist in Egypt in 2009, 2010, 2011, during those early days of the Arab Spring. And I then spent the next 10 years working on open source technology for newsrooms and journalists and investigators and fact checkers. And yeah, I'm a linguist by training, and I love working with journalists all around the world.
I'm Fergus. I am your business partner at Fathm, co-founder of Fathm as well. My training is as a journalist. I studied journalism at university, quickly fell into TV news. I started working for ITN on the news desk there, working for Channel 4, ITV News. I never quite did Channel 5 News, but I did the rest of them, including the news channel. And then I got a job at the Associated Press at the most junior level, working on the news desk there, and eventually working my way up as a assistant producer, senior producer, news editor. And then I became the AP's first social media editor and focused a lot on verification and news gathering and kind of looking at the Arab Spring. And that's where we first met.
Yes, I invited you to come and do some training for some journalists in Egypt, and you said, no, absolutely not.
I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't think I can go to Egypt at the moment. I think you wanted me to go to Egypt.
Yep.
Right in the middle of the Arab Spring. And I was very much doing my job at my desk and didn't think that I could go and do a training there. You consistently remind me that I declined this offer, and I will forever feel guilty about that. But it worked out in the end, because we then reconnected a few years later when we were doing a training at the BBC for journalists on verification. And that's where we started to kind of collaborate on verification work. We were working for separate companies. I was an independent. You were working for a non-profit technology company. But we actually developed an idea together.
The idea that we worked on was called Pop-Up Newsroom, which was the idea that for big events, things like elections, you really need to find ways for newsrooms to collaborate, to cover them at the scale that's needed for something like that, especially as we were going into sort of 2016, 2017, and election misinformation was all over the place. And this is still a challenge that remains to this day, and I'm sure is one that we'll talk about a lot on this show. So Pop-Up Newsroom was the idea that instead of just using the old systems for how they were working, and that actually we needed to redesign what a big collaboration could look like. And we'd tested that out with some other partners in the US in 2016. And then we ran the first ever Pop-Up Newsroom in 2017 in London, I think.
Yeah, for the election. And it went okay. It was a really small little pop-up newsroom in the city university. And when we were doing these things, no one really wanted to participate from kind of industry, because people didn't think that election misinformation was a thing. And that happened in a lot of places that we did this. No, it's not a thing. Turns out it is a thing if you actually start looking for it. So yeah, we continue to do these in other places. Sweden, our big one was where we did something for the US elections in 2016, which was like a precursor to the original pop-up newsroom, and that was a huge operation. And I think we can go into that in a lot more detail at another time, because that was months of work.
There's a couple of things that think about a lot from those days. One is how when we would go to a country, could be India or Mexico or Sweden, and you get a group of journalists in a room together, and they say, everything's very different here, which is, of course, true on one level. But then when you actually start looking at the kinds of misinformation that are coming through any system that you set up, there are really clear trends. And actually, while country to country may be different, and we went through a whole design process every single time, we thought that was really important. Misinformation is global, and you can really clearly see trends that have played out in one market like Mexico will still play out somewhere like Sweden, even though those are two completely different places, different media ecosystems, different election processes. But we were seeing the same things, and the journalists couldn't quite believe that.
And to keep us on track from the original question, which is why we're making this show, this is why we're making this show, because what we have seen throughout our careers are people talking about the problems, often after the fact, and very little offered up in the way of solutions or solutions that can be implemented quickly enough. We go to a lot of events. We speak to a lot of people through our work. We have always tried to be people of action. That is often easier to say and harder to do. But we want to see the change happen when it's needed. And that means talking about solutions and not just talking about the problems all the time. So we didn't want to do a podcast for a long time. We resisted because we weren't really sure what we would have to say. But it turns out that we have these conversations all the time, and amongst ourselves. And some people have said, why aren't you having these discussions more publicly out there in the open? And some of those people, a lot of those people are not journalists. They're people that we meet and are fascinated by the business of news, the business of media, what's going on with AI and creators. And it shouldn't be behind closed doors. It shouldn't just be within a small circle. This conversation needs to be accessible. So that's why we're doing it. Tom, what do you think we're going to talk about?
I think that there's really almost an endless list of things that we'll talk about, because some of the big topics, actually, we need to talk about them in so many levels and so many ways, from the economics of how this works, from the power dynamics of big platforms, from the perspective of change in the newsroom and how journalists feel about this stuff, from the audience's side, why do they feel certain ways about different things. And fundamentally, all of this is about an industry that plays a really important role in society. It seems like there are these big waves that are constantly kind of crashing over us. And I guess our mission and vision, the kind of through line of a lot of our work, is how can we help the people kind of steering the ship not be buffeted by waves, but actually kind of look a little bit out onto the horizon and position themselves more effectively to take advantage, because there are tremendous opportunities, and there's a real need for us to capitalize on those opportunities. And so we want to be thinking about how can we do that.
I think also the industry that we've grown up in with our careers, and actually growing up watching TV news, listening to the radio, for most of that time, no one ever got to see behind the curtain. And this is not going to be revelations behind the curtain. Some of that stuff is not very interesting. But I remember someone saying to me in a newsroom, Fergus, no one cares how the sausage is made. And I disagreed at the time, and I disagree now. And I think actually people want to know how this is made, because we talk about trust all the time. And you can't, if you don't know how something is made, how do you trust it? We need to talk about provenance, and we need to explain provenance to people. And I think provenance in terms of how news and journalism and media is created, and who is doing that, and what that means for those who are kind of the next generation in the form of creators, how they're doing it, and what provenance means to them. So for me, we're going to be talking about what it looks like behind the scenes, how those decisions are made. And when you were saying about, we're going to cover AI, yeah, we're going to cover AI. But I'm almost certain that we're never going to just say, today we're talking about AI. We're going to be grown up about it and more nuanced, and say, we're going to be talking about artificial or synthetic voices, or we're going to talk about agentic workflows, and we're going to explain what agentic workflows are, what the limitations are, what the opportunities are, and hopefully people will walk away from listening or watching this podcast with an understanding of what that means to them, how they might use it, or how they might understand it as they consume media. And I think we'll try and bring in some interesting guests to our discussions.
Yeah, one thing we'll definitely do at some point is I'll do a rant about human in the loop, so we can all look forward to that. I think that my parents and my in-laws basically have no idea what I do. When I say I work in journalism, they think of a reporter, which makes sense. But actually, I think some of the most interesting people that we speak to and work with are people who work behind the scenes in strategy or product or audience development. There's a really fascinating ecosystem of people who are making the sausage, and I think and they're often the people at the front lines of like how these changes in technology and audience trends are playing out.
But this is also a global podcast, so yeah, we're two white dudes in the UK, but this is not going to be just the two of us talking to each other all the time. We work with news organizations, we work with creators all around the world. There are so many amazing lessons learned that to be learned from the work that is happening in other places. And we, as an industry and as I guess, society, need to look outside our own bubbles. I think we could touch slightly on kind of what the media and tech and journalism landscape looks like right now. It looks so different to what it looked like a year ago because things are changing very quickly. Even in the last few years, speaking to colleagues, they'd be saying, well, I'm a journalist, I'm a reporter, I just want to focus on the story. That is pretty rare now. Almost everyone has to understand the business that they operate in and why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that is why something like these conversations will hopefully be useful to people, because they will need to keep across what's happening as it's relevant to their own journalism and their own business models. What do you think the kind of state of the industry or what it looks like right now is?
I think you're right. It's really difficult to say because it feels like things are changing so quickly. And I think that's been the case kind of basically throughout my career. I remember the first week I arrived in Egypt in 2009 was during the a protest in Iran, and I was following what was going on through Twitter, and that felt like a huge deal at the time. And you were probably away verifying stuff at the AP. And then if you kind of like fast forward through things like the great pivot to video, the rise of more visual platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Now we're dealing with AI that is improving and changing and enabling new functionality and changing audience experience. And this is sort of like happening almost week by week. And it's really hard for people to keep up and kind of make sense of the direction of travel, I think.
But are people keeping up with that direction of travel?
I think some people are. I think what I see and what I worry about is it's so hard to keep up with the changes happening now. It's difficult to think about how those changes are going to play out in the next 2, 3, 5 years. And I worry that we spend a lot of time thinking about what the current technology can do here and now, and not enough time thinking about where are people going to be getting information in 2 years.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I guess my worry is that a lot of people are sticking their head in the sand. And so if I think about what does the media, tech, journalism landscape look like right now, I think it looks like almost a kind of 2-tier system or a split is emerging. There are those who are kind of saying, yeah, let's experiment and maybe fail fast and take some of those lessons from tech companies and just say, this is here. Let's completely understand how it works and take it on. And we'll worry about the economics of it later. And then there are people who are like, this is too fast. I don't want to see this change. I am not ready for this change. I want to resist this change. And I'm really worried about the economics. And I'm going to say I'm worried about the economics before I do anything else. I think we've seen that before. And I think we've seen which organizations and leaders emerge from it. But I think I think everything is savable now, and I think we need to just make sure that we show that this is not scary, that there are ways to be sensible with this change and consider with this change while moving at a much faster pace. And I think that it will be a thread through almost everything that we talk about. And I really hope that we can talk to people who are doing both, throwing everything in straight away, and also people who are being much more considered, relying on regulation, relying on process and structure, and seeing how they're navigating it successfully, as well as identifying those who are maybe not. This is not a name and shame type situation, but this is a kind of how do we talk about those who are doing really amazing things so that everyone can be lifted up and share those kind of common experiences. Because one thing that's not true is that, my situation is unique, our organization is unique, our audiences are unique. We know that that's not the case.
And I think maybe what's different about this current moment to the arrival of social media is that at the moment, journalism as an industry is not unique. And actually, if you look at legal or software, there are huge industries that are going through really difficult transformations. And so I think it'd be really interesting to speak to some of the people from those industries to kind of hear how they're thinking about it, and whether there are solutions to challenges or new opportunities that they've identified in finance or advertising.
Yeah, I mean, I've already got some stories that I've been collecting around how people are using AI in power plants that actually could be applied to a production workflow system in the same way, or an outside broadcast setup. So we should bring those voices in. We could talk about what's working and what's not working. I don't think we need to, just as a kind of outline, I don't think we need to get into the nitty gritty, but I would say what is working at the moment is that there are those people who are really trying to move beyond experimentation. So when I said that there was a two-tier system of kind of those people sticking their head in the sand and those people who were just diving into it, I do think that within the people who are diving into it, there's also kind of several layers. There's the people who are doing the things that are working are those who are moving beyond prototyping and moving to what does implementing this look like now, or what does just kind of putting this out in the wild and see how it works as an experiment. I think those people are doing things that are working. The people who are just looking at testing things in small teams continuously and never taking that out to something wider, we don't know if that's going to work or not yet. My hunch is it's got a lifetime. There's a limit to how long you can do that for.
Yeah, I think it's about it's about speed of learning, right? And if you're trying to kind of make best use of a technology that is changing really quickly, then you've got to be learning really quickly. And experiments are one way to do that. But I think what we've seen, and we're not just talking about AI here too. I think this plays out in many different aspects of news and media. But I think that you can build something as an individual or as a small team pretty easily and test it. But the bigger challenge is how do you get that into the hands of your colleagues, of bigger teams, where there's many kind of levers and resistance to change comes from a lot of different non-technological sources, right? It's cultural, it's emotional, and so there's often a bigger change that needs to happen.
And they see disruption as a bad thing, whereas actually disruption is just kind of change that's happening even faster and a bit more radically. I think people shied away from things by saying, "Oh, that's too disruptive," or it changes too many things about what we're doing, about how we've always done it. Those kind of common conversations you have with people Whereas actually disruption creates the opportunity for brand new business models, brand new ways of doing things, brand new opportunities for people to do different roles and different things with journalism or news or content creation. But you can only get there by kind of breaking it open and putting it back together again in a way that's representative of 2026.
Yeah.
Is there organizational risk in being disruptive or not being disruptive?
I was about to say, I think the disruption is here, kind of whether we like it or not. And so the only thing that we can change is our position to disruption. And we can't. I don't think it's sort of tenable to try and resist disruption in a kind of batten down the hatches kind of way. These kind of mega trends are playing out, and they're playing out because fundamentally our audiences love creators. They love getting their information from people they trust that are giving us information with personality, and they find a lot of utility in getting information from ChatGPT and AI-powered search. So if those are the people who are, basically we're trying to reach and speak to and engage with and build community with, then we need to understand why they get value out of those things and what our value as news is in their lives in this new ecosystem. So disruption is here. There's no kind of resisting that. And we need to take the moment to kind of figure out what our response is.
And we need to kind of just break the connection that disruption is bad. Disruption has been, in technology, has been pretty good in a lot of ways. I mean, you remember when all of those banks, those disruptor banks started out, and now Revolut being one of them, and now Revolut is now an official bank. And many, many, many millions of people use them and they're very happy, and they've changed the way that the rest of banking has had to work. Disruption can be good, and I think it's about harnessing it, and it's about, there is some organizational risk, but what if the bigger organizational risk is not doing anything at all, which I very much feel is the situation we're in right now. If you don't take a risk and you don't kind of disrupt your existing processes and ways of working, you are going to fall too far behind. We're seeing it. We're seeing it all the time.
I think sometimes not doing something is a decision and a strategy, and I think sometimes people think that by not doing something that actually they're kind of just focusing on what they're doing, but actually that's a really important decision. Sometimes it can be a good decision, but if you're not adapting, that's also a kind of strategic choice and probably an error, I'd say.
So, what do you think those who are forward thinking, forward looking are talking about and thinking about right now?
How forward thinking?
I think let's say those people, the people that we know who have been on the cutting edge, who were first for AI adoption, who were first for experimenting, they're now fairly big names in industry in terms of how they look at AI, and they've got some good case studies. We're going to ask them what they're thinking about, but what do you think they're thinking about?
I think they're thinking about what happens in a world where people are served good quality news and information in a way that never requires them to go to a news website. And what does that mean for audience experience? What does that mean for brand trust? What does that mean for the economics, right? There's actually like really important thinking that needs to happen, and people are starting to work on this sort of, how do you pay for the information that is going into AI systems that then comes out the other end, and how does that actually work? Not sort of like, do a big deal with a platform, but like what is on on a kind of micro transactional level, how does that work? Because this technology plays out in really interesting ways once you start to explore some of those things.
I'm sure that people are thinking that. They're very much keeping it to themselves if they are, because we've not really seen that many people talking about that. Maybe I should reframe the question. What do you think people should be talking about that we haven't seen them talking about yet? You know that my thing is glasses. I think that and I saw something today. I could have misread this, but I thought like OpenClaw is coming to glasses. So I think that glasses are going to be a thing. I think that Samsung's got their glasses coming out. We've got Apple maybe working on some glasses. I don't know. Meta have got 3 or 4 on the 3rd or 4th iteration of their glasses. The Samsung glasses are a Google collaboration, I think. So this 2026 is the year of glasses, and kind of what does that mean for AI implementation, for liquid content, for the interaction, for how news is paid for, the interaction between a user as they see the world and news information and kind of up-to-date accurate information. I've been talking about that. Can I get on a stage and talk about it anywhere? No one will have me. But I think people won't have me because I'm the only person. I'm one of the only people who are talking about it, and a lot of the time the conversations are around what everyone is already talking about, and so not necessarily what people might be thinking about in the future. There was a period in the news industry where there were a lot of conferences that were very forward looking, and that you'd have drones and 3D cameras in the room, and people I can't believe this, and like cardboard VR headsets. People didn't believe it, but a lot of that stuff has come true. They were willing to consider it. That doesn't happen now. So we don't have a chance to talk about glasses. We don't have a chance to talk about things that are actually too disruptive to the existing model.
I think it's a challenge of imagination, and maybe at the moment we're as an industry kind of scared to imagine different futures, right? And just because I don't know, I'm not as sold on as glasses as you are.
You'll see.
But I think it's a very interesting thing to think about and talk about, and engage with seriously, because I don't think it's the glasses are coming, right? I think you did some really interesting work around audio assistants, and that was, I don't know, when were you doing that?
I went in
15, 16.
I went into a news agency to talk about the future of news, and maybe there was a reason that you needed to think about audio because people would be asking a question or asking for the news. And I went in there and did a presentation, and people thought that I was crazy, I think.
I told them if we should pitch that same thing now, because I think the way that you think about glasses, I think about sort of like in-ear audio, which feels underexplored, I'd say, right now. We say as we're making a podcast.
I'm a relatively new glasses wearer, and I was banging on about this before I started wearing glasses. I think wearables. I mean, I've been wearing I had a Pebble watch, which was like one of the first smartwatches, and I was thinking about news on the Pebble watch. So I think I think that the advancements in technology and the advancements in news have to go side by side. And I think one of the biggest failures of both the tech and the news and content industry is to not think about the development together. It's like technology company will come out with a product, news organizations will think, how do we get on that product? And actually, it's not like there's not so many conversations between the two. We're designing something that would be great for audiences. What about working with the people who have really thought about audiences and information for 100 years? that kind of collaboration doesn't happen.
You can sort of see this if you think about when podcasting really took off. It was basically when things like AirPods became normal, right? And you wouldn't intuitively necessarily or obviously think the invention of wireless, tiny battery, good quality headphones is going to radically change how people get news and information and talk about politics and culture and comedy. But actually, there's been a huge influence. So maybe I'm actually coming back to your glasses idea, and we should do it. Would you wear camera glasses?
I think I would wear camera.
Would I speak to you if you're wearing camera glasses?
Would I wear camera glasses? I think there has to be some kind of new etiquette created around glasses and how they're worn and those devices that are capturing things. You told me about a time recently where you were having a conversation with someone and they got out their little AI recording device.
Yeah.
What's the etiquette there? But on a Zoom, we're recording each other's. We're recording our meetings all the time to capture what we say, to be able to summarize it. But that's become very normalized to do that virtually. The next step is to do it. Kind of in real life. I would love to walk around a foreign city with glasses that had a camera and to have everything that I'm looking at translated in real time and in front of my eyes. I'd love to be able to do that. I'd love to be able to talk to someone and talk in my own language and they talk in theirs and have that translated in real time. You don't need a camera for that, but
that's that's in the latest AirPods.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to buy some glasses so that I can test this out. Rob, what should we in the next? So coming up in future episodes, I want to do several deep dives into creators. I want to talk about the creator economy. I want to talk about the business model behind creator distribution and really why a lot of the news industry has completely misunderstood that model and how it works. And I want to talk about trust and creators and how that kind of works with news and journalism and audiences. I want to talk specifically about various elements within the AI sphere. So from kind of implementation of AI technologies to implementation of AI governance frameworks in a way that is not boring and is interesting to people who are listening to it, and kind of why that's important. And I think we're going to be on the road. So part of this podcast is about taking it to the places where we go and we talk to industry leaders and getting their voices in. So next week we're heading to the International Journalism Festival. In a few weeks time after that, I'll be in the Philippines talking to journalists and news leaders there. After that, we'll be in Marseille at the World News Media Congress, which is a place where there were hundreds of news content leaders from around the world. And we'll be going out elsewhere to non-journalism events, to technology conferences. We are booked for Slush in Finland in the autumn, which we've been to before and inspired us to do a lot of the things that we've done at Fathm, and that had nothing to do with the industry. So that's a lot of things to come up in a year, but it's focusing on creators, AI, and getting out there into the world and bringing those voices from the conversations that happen that don't necessarily get heard by other people who are not there.
And for me, I would love to talk about some of the buzzwords that we hear at conferences and try and explore them in a little bit of depth. So I'm thinking liquid content. I'm thinking agentic AI. I'm thinking human in the loop. I think there's probably quite a lot around, I guess it's like news creators or news influencers. There are a whole host of things around the audience side and audience engagement and audience growth. So I think there's lots of things to kind of unpack.
And the truth is that we're creators now. We're going to be talking about our journey and what it looks like, and maybe trying to break down some of the mechanics. Like, getting to this point has been a long journey. Maybe people don't realize that. Maybe people do realize that. We didn't. So maybe we can talk a bit about that as we go along.
We'll be sharing the things that we learned from our trusty producer, Rob.
That's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear more of us.